Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to make a video just talking about Giliath Osborne from the Trails of Cold Steel games. If you're unaware who Giliath Osborne is, he's kind of the main antagonist of the Cold Steel games, and you have to put quotes around it because that's a whole situation. I mean, and before I even really get into it, this is going to be kind of a spoiler video. I'm going to be just talking about, in general, about some stuff about his character from over the course of the Trail of Cold Steel game, so it will involve spoilers. So if you haven't played them, do not listen to this because I don't want to spoil or ruin anything for you. So you have been warned ahead of time. But even that in itself is such a fascinating thing about Giliath Osborne. I think his character, because when you actually look back at the totality of how much he's in those games, he's not in there much. I mean, to be fair, it's Osborne. Osborne being who he is kind of the tactician that he is. Like, he's got his hands in every little pot. Like, obviously, like, he's a very behind-the-scenes person, so for him not being in the games that much, it makes sense. But I also think it's fascinating because I said, like, quote-unquote main antagonist, because obviously we know that really it was Ishmelga behind everything. I mean, it was him, but he was being controlled because, you know, the curse and everything. But it's also fascinating to me because that he doesn't actually step into the antagonist, full-on antagonist role until 3. Because obviously he's just kind of like, because obviously in 1 you hear about some of the stuff that he gets into, and you're like, oh, Osborne's kind of a dick, isn't he? 2, he's dead, and he doesn't pop up until literally the very end of the final act, and then like that little bit at the beginning at Crossbill. So he's barely in 2. And then obviously he's orchestrating so much behind the scenes in 3, but even then you're still seeing him only pop up every once in a while. It's actually interesting because like 4 is the first game where you actually personally clash with him, which I find fascinating. That being when everyone goes to rescue Rean, like that's the first time you actually full on clash. I guess you could make the argument you kind of had run-ins because obviously you're constantly running into Claire and Lecter, and obviously Million, you know, being, you know, an Iron Button, and obviously you find out about Rufus and everything. So it's like you've always had indirect connections to, I mean, well, the most indirect yet direct being Rean being his kid, you know, so. And that's also, to me, and because that's the thing about Giliath Osborne I find fascinating, is like he's such a tragic character because like I said, most of the games you'd be like, man, Osborne's a dick, and you find out like, oh, he wasn't. Because that's the sad thing is, like, over the course of the games, you never really get to know a lot about Osborne. Now, once again, I try to make it clear, I'm someone who's not well versed in the Trails games. Like, I've only played Trails of Cold Steel 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't know whether it's the whether the Liberal games, you know, the Trails in the Sky games, or the Crossbell games reference him at all. There's some like screenshots of stuff I've seen connected to him, like, because like I know there was like one particular screenshot or at least a picture or something I've seen of Osborne, baby Rean, and, you know, Osborne's wife, but that's about it. So I don't know whether, you know, the next game, Hajimari no Kiseki, which, you know, I've talked about before, it's only out in Japan currently. I don't know if that dives a little bit in that fast, because Rean even makes a comment on it in 4 that, like, this is the first time he's ever really gotten to know his dad, which is interesting when you think about it. Like, he got to know his dad through, like, oh, like, because at first it's like, oh, he heard rumors and all this stuff about the way Osborne acted as Chancellor, like a lot of the, like, kind of effed up, shady stuff he did, and then to find out, like, on top of that, it's like, oh, it's your dad, and your best friend is dead because of your dad. You're like, obviously it left him with a lot of conflicted emotions, but to learn, like, you know, at the very, very end of 4, Rean's like, oh, I finally get to meet the real you, because the entire time he's never really met the real Osborne. Because the only people who've ever really talked about it was like, Van Dyke talks about it, I think, a little bit in 2 about Osborne. I think he talks about it a little bit in 1 after you meet Osborne for the first time, I think. But then after, like, he definitely talks about it more a little bit, like, you know, during the epilogue when he's like, because Rean's like, does Van Dyke know? And it's like, Van Dyke had an idea. And obviously in 3, he talks to Olaf, who gives you a little bit of an idea of kind of who Osborne was. And obviously around the 100-Day War, like, obviously he disappeared for like 3 months, came back, ended the 100-Day War, and then it was like, he was kind of a different person, and he quickly rose through the ranks. But now it's also because, like, we know that Emperor Yujik knew about him being, you know, Draco's reincarnation. And I think that adds an extra layer to the tragedy of his story, knowing like who he was, that he was like what Draco's story is, and to know that technically that's part of Osborne's story, but to know because of that, you know, Ishmelga was haunting him, trying to get control of him, but Draco's didn't give in. And the only reason why Osborne did is because, remember that line of like, you know, his wife had died and it's just like protect Rean, and it's like ADOs or the devil, whoever answers my wish, just spare my son's life. And you know, that's, you know, that gave Ishmaelga the opening, like, oh, I'll help save your son's life, but you're mine now. You're going to help me enact what eventually becomes like the Great Twilight, and stealing the phantasmal Blaze plan. Because that's another thing too, like I said, he doesn't fully step in a role of villain until 3, but technically he's been orchestrating everything for the greater purpose of the Great Twilight and everything, so it's always been building there. He just doesn't fully step into the villain role until 3, but in retrospect you're like, oh, I mean, I guess you could even make the argument like, you know, he's been a villain for the past, you know, 14 years, you know, canonically speaking, where things kind of are, because even during the liberal stuff, he was already under, you know, after like straightening out the whole 100-day war, like he was already under Ishmaelga's control at the time, so he's been a villain the entire time. It's just he didn't fully step out into the spotlight until, well, the end of 2, when he plans to steal the Phantasmal Blaze Man from Ouroboros, but even then it's not clear that he's a full-on villain until 3, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm about to do all this stuff, like, oh, basically I'm about to plunge this world into the Great Twilight, and you're like, oh, okay, you're kind of a madman, but not, like I said, now knowing like what was behind all that. I mean, because it adds more tragedy to, like I said, to everything, just because it's like, you know, it was, you know, the need to save his son that created that situation. And also, like, you know, it adds this layer to the whole, you know, Leanne and him situation, which it makes it even more impactful knowing that now when you look back at like when you're rescuing Rean, that they're fighting side by side. I mean, obviously Leanne always had her reasons of like she wanted to be the one to destroy Ishmaelga, so she was handling things on her own, which once again, it's a sad thing where like that's a theme where a lot of people, Rean in particular, Leanne, they kind of have that bad habit of let's take care of things on our own, like kind of shoulder that burden ourselves, not reaching out and asking other people for help. But I talked about this, which I thought was so impactful, was like Osborne telling Rean, it's like, I get that you care about your friends and the people around you, they mean a lot to you, you're willing to sacrifice yourself for them, but you don't need to. Let them be there for you, let them carry that burden. Even Rean being like, yeah, I'll try. Like, that's always something he struggled with. So for his father's final piece of advice to him, you know, and I think for Rean, like finally getting to see Osborne, finally getting to meet his father, because for him it was like, you know, obviously he struggled with that at the end of 2, all of 3 with just coming to, you know, dealing with the fact is, because it's obviously like only people who knew were new other characters kind of figured it out on their own, like Toa and stuff like that. I think even Toval kind of pieced it together, but like at the end of the day, you know, only main class 7 knew, because new class 7 doesn't find out until, well, I know that Muse, Mildine, always, she kind of already knew that's why she needed Rean to a certain extent anyway. Ash was unaware, but like Yuna and Kurt didn't know, but Allie obviously knew because she was there during the reveal. To me, what I think is still, and I've talked about this before too, what I think is kind of a nice thing about it is that I don't know if this gets changed in Hajimaria. Like I don't know, I don't think they get rid of that, but it's like at least knowing that Rean will always carry a piece of his father with him. You know, and because obviously, like I said, for a while he's just always been like, no, Teo Schwarzer's my real only father I've ever known. But kind of getting to understand why Osborne's in the position he's in, realizing like it's not his fault. Like, you know, you know, especially because I think the parallels between like Rean starting the Great Twilight by killing the Holy Beast and everything with Millium, I think that kind of, you know, I think he can kind of understand like, oh yeah, like, you know, being consumed by something, trying to do the right thing and kind of losing yourself. Like he can understand that. I think maybe that's the parallels that we're kind of going for in that regard. But I think it's nice to know like he got to finally meet his dad at the very end, and they get to spend a lot of time together, but at the very least he'll always be like, his dad will always be in his heart. I mean, obviously, like, because I also forgot like Teo and Osborne were like brothers growing up, so if Rean ever wants to know more about him, he can always talk to Olaf, Van Dyke, or his dad or Teo to learn more about Osborne. So I don't know, just stuff I, you know, was just kind of thinking about. Like I said, it's just kind of like the tragedy that is this particular, you know, villain. You know, just what circumstances led him going down that route. I mean, it's still just that thing of like, because you know, for Rean, he also has that thing of like all that you've done. You know, everything connected to like North Ambria. Also, cross-spell situation, knowing that you helped basically orchestrate the Northern War to, like, not the Northern War, the well, what was known as the October War, which is like the Civil War in Erebonia, that obviously you had Rufus like working behind the scenes, like secretly working for you as, you know, one of your, so it's like you orchestrated so much, but at the same time it wasn't you, but it's still like, yeah, you're still the one that kind of did what happened to Jirai, and that's kind of what set Crow on the path of revenge, but it's still, like I said, it wasn't him, so it just makes you a little sympathetic to everything. Like, I think it's so interesting, because like I said, like for the first 3 games, it's like, oh, Osborne's a dick, and then by 4, you're still kind of like, ah, he seems like an asshole, like, what does he do? Oh, this is what's been going on the entire time that just everyone was unaware of, you know. So obviously these are just some of my thoughts. I'd love to get to know your thoughts about Osborne in the comments down below. Just talking about, like, you know, everything that, you know, we know. Like I said, I don't know if there's other stuff in the other games that have really dived into him more, that you get more a little bit. Like I said, I don't know whether it's in the Laburo games or Crossbow games or even Hajimari, just because I haven't played any of those. So just let me know all your thoughts. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.